When I started Megaport, I had this kind of challenge. I was building a data center in a city. They'd already had 2 data centers that had the cloud on-ramps already in there. We're talking 2012. And somehow I needed to have cloud available in that data center. So I looked at the problem and I thought, there's got to be a way to solve this.
So Bevan called me, and we were both working at NextDC at that time. We had 2 major data centres that we'd just launched for Melbourne and Brisbane, and both were going really, really well. We had then gone and we were building Sydney, and he rang me, and I remember it vividly. He rang me and said, "How are you going with Sydney?" As I was looking after all of the carriers and OTTs. And I said, to be honest, really terribly. Equinix were already in Sydney for years and years prior to us building S1, and we were really struggling to get them to get into the facility, particularly with no customers there while we were kind of still in build mode. And he said, "Well, does it really matter if we don't get them in the facility?" I was like, "What do you mean? Of course it matters." And he said, "Well, why don't we just tether it? Like, why does it matter? Why can't we just create a fabric that maybe there's a concept here that we're not thinking of? That why don't we create essentially a metro mesh? And it doesn't matter for our corporate customers where those carriers or OTTs are located."
When Bev approached us about Megaport, it was a really interesting idea. We'd been working on automating a lot of stuff at Pipe, but with a brownfield network and all of the existing legacy that was there. We got really close, but being able to start at Megaport kind of from scratch was a really interesting prospect, and it really helped us kind of take the next leap basically into getting to where we've got today.
One of the biggest things that we did differently to what was in the original idea was around the fibre network, the underground fibre network. Bevan had big plans for building an underground fibre network and to service customers in the data centre from street cabinets outside the data centre. That fibre network that we started to build was split off into Superloop, and it became more economical for us to build into the data centres directly and then actually have switches and routers installed in the facility.
Essentially what he created from that was the Megaport concept. He was talking to a few people about it, and at that stage he couldn't create that at NextDC because we would essentially be competing with the connectivity providers within the data centre. So he flipped it out and created Megaport.
The magnitude of what we were embarking on at the time wasn't felt until you started to reflect back on where we were in those early days, sitting around Church Street on trundle tables. It was really special to be part of, and I'm honoured for the experience.
In the early days of Megaport, what people don't know is most of the foundation team actually took a significant pay cut to be there. They were so aligned and really just amazed at this vision, and they were some of the first people in the world to get the concept. And really, from our perspective, we would do whatever it took. It didn't matter what our position was. We'd take out the bins in Church Street, we'd put the steak on the barbecue every Friday. It was all about alignment and respect for each other and just doing absolutely whatever it took to get the job done.
Everybody was bought into the vision, everyone was bought in to the outcomes that we needed to achieve. And that office environment, as we grew, the team up in Brisbane did an exceptional job in maintaining that culture, maintaining that mateship and that camaraderie that ultimately is still carried through Megaport today.
One thing that's really interesting about Megaport is 10 years ago, distributed workforces were really, they weren't like they are today, and we just wanted the best talent no matter where they were located. All we cared about was, are they right for our culture? Are they right for what we need to achieve and the function we need to achieve? And that was something that was completely unheard of 10 or even 8-7 years ago.
When we started Megaport, it was like all the other startups I had before. It's complete focus around the vision. We had a vision to networking what Amazon did to compute, which is complete virtualization. And so with that kind of vision, we were so focused on it. It wasn't about the office space. It wasn't about, the perks. It was solely on that vision. So we built this amazing team around us that were focused on that, and we were frugal as hell. And we just ran, and we ran so quickly. And that was always some of the greatest moments of startup. As hard as they are, as tight as they are, long hours, doing things that are that have never genuinely, in Megaport's case, never been done before.
Honestly, they were some of the most enjoyable and most challenging times of my career, and I think the team now, we're all still really, really close, and we're all a massive testament to the vision and certainly to Bevan.
If you're behind that purpose, then everything is worthwhile.
When I first arrived, we didn't have anything, in terms of systems, and we were charged with bringing it all up out of the ground from nothing. So Cam and Mitch were working on automating the networks. They're doing it quite an innovative thing, innovative for the industry, is the idea of having the network just completely defined in a database and then having software agents that make that come true and configure the network. So the idea was a zero-touch physical network where engineers don't log onto devices and everything's just managed centrally. So that way you can have a small engineering team and just scale wildly.
I remember when we started, Bev had this idea of he wanted to get the east coast of Australia built in 3 months. I think Mitch remembers a different number, but I remember 3 months. And so we've had to build the network, write the systems, get all the stuff up to date, and get everything released in like this insane time frame. And that included us flying around to do the installs as well. And I think we hit the mark. We didn't really have a portal in place at that point, but customers could email us and we would enter it behind the scenes, but the magic all still happened, just without a pretty face. So that was a lot of fun.
Cameron and I, we were both always thinking about scaling. Bevan was pretty big on going large with this. But I think we had a lot of doubts about whether the things we were building were going to scale well. I think in the end we were pleasantly surprised about how far we got with the things that we'd built, how well they had scaled. It probably wasn't until we were getting near 100 or more pops that we really had to rethink some of the bigger decisions that we'd made about how to scale things on the network.
We had the advantage of being such a small team that when we're making a product decision, we'd all just turn our chairs around and say, we're going to call this product, and have the whiteboard, what are we going to call it? This, or virtual cross connect. I was in the room when we were discussing what are the names, and we're all having a robust discussion, and that's the name. And so many of the decisions early on were so collaborative. We're all on the same page because we're all in the same room, sitting right next to each other. And that made it a very productive, it's one of the most productive times of my life, because there's only so few people doing things. Decisions were made almost instantly. You can have a great idea at morning tea, and at afternoon tea, it's in production. And that's a productivity and a speed of development that I've never experienced in my life.
So the original brief for the logo was a little bit loose. We sort of got it a little bit wrong. We thought it was all about connecting buildings, but it didn't take us very long to realise we were not heading in the right direction.
We were working on a whole series of logos. I think we got about 13 or 14 of them. And the funny story is, we only had probably about 8 people at the time. And I said, we've got to pick a logo. We're going to go live at the website. We've got to get this branding right. We're going to live this with Decision forever. So I gathered everyone around. I put all the sheets on the whiteboard, kind of with those magnetic kind of buttons. And we sat back and I said, everyone, here's a whiteboard marker. Go and mark which one you think is your favourite and second favourite.
Once we understood more about Megaport and the fabric, we had a bit of a vision about how we're going to move forward. So we had this idea of using endpoints and connections, and also trying to bind it with the M out of Megaport. At this point, the logo still felt incomplete, so we were manipulating the endpoints. And as we did, this rocket emerged, and it was really interesting.
The logo we have now is probably the third most popular logo. Something that we kind of learnt pretty quick is that this might seem like a democracy, but it's actually a benevolent dictatorship. So I basically said, I really like the one you've chosen, but I'm going to completely ignore that. And we're going to go with Megaport Rocket. And we did, and thank God we did.
The logo was really cool and it was so different to what anyone in the industry had out there. But importantly, it's what we did with the brand that made it so viral. It was the stickers, it was the shirts, everything was so different to what the industry had seen before. It just completely went off.
You know, for the most years when we started, the shareholder was just me. It was all funded through me. And what was kind of going on at the time, I actually had two companies I was funding. You know, Megaport started life as both the elastic interconnection company, which was really our vision. At the same time, I was building a fibre network underneath it because I just didn't think that carriers would want me to leverage their assets and do what it is that we were about to do. Superloop, from the assets, I moved the assets outside of Megaport. Superloop was actually a product name under Megaport to sell fibre, but I knew Megaport, if it was going to become a global play, it really needed to be completely by itself, and we needed to sell one product, and that's elastic interconnection.
The lead up to listing the company was an exercise in naivety and sheer audacity. I remember when Bevan came to me and said, I reckon that we can list this thing and raise money on the stock market. And this at the time was a company which had 28 employees. It had an idea, it had a platform that wasn't well known, wasn't known about, wasn't well understood. The audacity of thinking that we could list this and raise money like that, it was an amazing time. And a good thing that we were probably innocent and naive about how we did it as well.
Yeah, Megaport was the kind of fifth IPO I did in basically a decade. Bit of a joke is kind of, you know, a bit of the king of the ASX, I think they were reporting at the time. And look, it was pretty bold and audacious because we had a business that was 3 years old, had an annualized run rate of about 2 million, just over $2 million, about 200 customers. But we had a pretty bold vision and we really need to take this to North America. And really for us to do that, we needed to raise $20 million. And I think I was pretty much at the acceptable limit that my wife was prepared to me to fund. So the ASX was a natural place to go. It was pretty cool on my way to see it perform so well on the first day. But because this is my fifth IPO, I know what that comes with, and that's the weight of expectation. So as much as you celebrate that, it's down to execution from there.
Megaport as a concept was at least 2 or 3 years before its time, and I think, you know, the foundation team that went out to commercialise this product literally drew the same picture, I think, 3,000 times in that first 18 months. Nobody understood it. It was a circle and endpoints to try and explain what even a fabric was. And particularly in Australia, no one even had 10 gig interfaces. It was like, absolutely, they were like, this is crazy, that's really cute concept, good luck with that. And we're like, this is a legitimate business. We're on the ASX. This is not a concept, we're a commercial business on the ASX.
That simple concept, it actually broke people's brains. And it broke people's brains who are so experienced in the industry, and I still struggle with that for years. You explain the concept, it's just simple, you do this. And I remember the first time I showed people that, we went to PTC, this conference we do every year, and it was almost like it was a party trick where people would go, oh, that's kind of cool, but what would I use it for? And I was like, well, to connect to the cloud, to connect to other carriers, to do all these things, how great would it be not to talk to someone? And it was honestly, it felt like a party trick the first year. And so the thing we talk about here all the time, it's the grind. The grind of actually having to go out and not just try to sell something, but first you've got to explain the vision that you've got, and you've actually got to educate people of the opportunity. And then once they understand that, then you can sell it. So we would have spent, I'm not joking, 2 to 3 years on the grind, explaining to the industry and to people what is Megaport, but more importantly, why it's going to be the future of networking for everyone. It was like swimming out in this belief that the wave was coming and I would swim out to the ocean, and you're waiting there for 2 years. And then you start to see the wave, and then you really see the wave. And the great part is, with that vision, if you're right, you're the only person there to catch the perfect wave. The problem is, 99 times out of 100, you think you're right, but the wave never comes. But fortunate for us, it did.
I actually remember an ITW vividly, and I think Bevan probably remembers this exact ITW. The Clouds asked us to go to North America, and at that point we had no plans on nailing that region, but we very, very quickly made a plan to solve that problem for them.
That 2017, all of a sudden, cloud really came to the fore. And it wasn't just AWS, it was Google, it was Microsoft Azure, and even Oracle Cloud. And all of a sudden, everyone wanted access to the enterprise, and everyone needed to get to the data centers to do that. So that was really the kind of breakout year where we had to go from 100 data centers to 500 in the next 2 to 3 years. And so that was incredibly exciting, but it was batshit crazy.
The moment that it got real for me was, when we started actually connecting those regions together. So it wasn't just about East Coast to West Coast of US talking to each other. It was the ability to actually go from the US to Australia, and then onto Europe with the eKicks acquisition as well. So that made the challenges scale. Obviously, there were components of the technology that needed to adapt with those longer latencies. But the real message was that the ease of use and the platform was just consistent across all of those regions. So it was really cool to be able to sing about that one platform, that one way of working that resonated, and then obviously tailor that message specifically for each of those countries into the customer needs as well.
What is quite incredible is Megaport is evolving again, more from the leader of cloud interconnection or elastic interconnection, and evolving more into a platform, and we're continuing to innovate. And I think that's what's really exciting about the company is this, the platform or automation comes first, and that's what we've always stuck by.
We're now in 24 countries. For an Australian company, that's pretty impressive. But you know how hard it is to administer 24 countries? It's a nightmare. But we had this amazing group of people who were incredibly driven, and they've been there from the start. And we've been building this team, we've built this culture that today is now the world's leading interconnection fabric. And it was pretty crazy.
I'm still really invested in the vision and of course on the Megaport team, and seeing Michael come in is such a nice thing for culture. He's such a people person, he's so dedicated to the vision, and he's an absolute weapon at revenue generation, so I can't wait to see what he does.
Over the past 10 years, it's incredible to think what this company's built. Over 800 data centers around the globe, there's 145 cities, 2,700 customers in that time to go and disrupt. And so at this pivotal moment in time, I would say, now we have this path to go and chart the journey for the next sort of 10 years. And that's what's exciting about coming into this business at this moment in time.
Really would struggle to be more proud than I am with the business today. The one thing that's really interesting for me is where to now. I'm really excited for what we're going to do for the next 10 years. Megaport was all about taking people to the cloud in the way that the cloud operates. I think our job for the next 10 years is to take it through the cloud and beyond. And I think it won't be long before people see where our vision's heading for the next 10, and I sure hope they like it.